Phoenix, want to go for a ride? What makes a memory? Do you ever notice that what we remember now is just so influenced by the images we've either seen in photographs or video clips? I mean, I know for a fact that when I was playing outside, the colors would have been as vibrant as the trees are outside today, and I know that the air wasn't as hazy as it looks in these clips. I know that the clubs didn't look as dark and actually had cool lighting, and I know that the camping trips had more sounds of nature. I know that entire days went by. These are just snippets of an entire day, but I clearly remember these moments. Why? Why do I remember these parts so clearly? It's kind of like when something big happens to you and you tell that story over and over to a friend. Eventually, all of those precise details just get ingrained in your head and you remember it clearly. But a lot of times, we're just taking photos of maybe a quick meal and posting it to Instagram, maybe a new outfit or a shopping trip. Would you actually remember it as naturally years from now, or is the fact that you filmed it in some way influencing just how much you remember that day? Last year, 2020, I wanted to make a video in our downtime on a simple little camcorder from Sony. I shot some footage, wrote a script, but then work during both the time we were all in quarantine and back in the studios broadcasting meant that the little camcorder video went on the back shelf. My main subject in that video throughout the year was my beloved forever pup Phoenix, who was always more than happy to help out with camera reviews. And it makes sense too, since the footage from this thing goes all the way back to the time when she was born. Then in October, after nearly 16 incredible years of being my camera assistant, appearing in countless test videos or videos produced for work, we went on a walk that we never knew would be the last one. She had a final sunset and then came home, and out of the blue, she passed on. It was kind of hard to edit a bunch of happy footage of her after that, so the camcorder video went by the wayside. But that was that. And I do genuinely think that this old camera is actually pretty cool for what it is. And I've got to admit, I've kind of got a bit of an attraction to old tech that's ahead of its time, something that Sony has been well known for. So you know what? Let's talk about it. This here was my very first ever camcorder, the Sony TRV730. Now, not the first one I've used or that my family used. Those were just these big, huge, monstrous things that kind of sat on your shoulder with a separate VCR with a big battery pack to power them all. And hey, look at that, that's me. Now, those were portable in a sense, but not something to easily get around with.
This is truly amazing. A portable television studio.
Now those ones did start to become more compact, having the VCR part built into the camera itself, which is great, but times go on, electronics get more compact, so eventually this had to change into something smaller. Now there were all kinds of smaller versions of these tapes, from VHS-C to High 8, which was basically 8mm tape to make things smaller. Just at the very end of the 90s and entering into the new millennium though, Sony came up with a new format that meant you didn't have to throw out all of your High 8 tapes that you had bought, and they called it Digital 8. Now, Digital 8 tapes technically had a different type of tape metal formulation than High 8 tapes, but overall, you could use either one inside their systems. And the picture quality was amazing for the time. And it actually still holds up today for stability, which is probably a little bit shocking to say. And I'm pretty sure that's because we tend to think that anything that came on a cassette tape must have inherently sucked or had bad quality, but that's just not true. The very first true high-definition video actually came on cassettes long before we started seeing HD quality on DVD and Blu-ray discs. Check out this clip. It's a DVHS, or digital VHS demo tape, shot in New York City in 1993. That's high-definition digital footage from almost 30 years ago. And it's kind of fortuitous, since the very first digital footage I have from my camera is my trip down to New York as well. But more on that in a little bit. Now, shrink the size of that tape down and you've sort of got this thing here. So, the camera. Now let's start off with a 2020 equivalent, because the camera I'm going to show you was so ahead of its time. A lot of what we see in modern day camcorders and professional video recorders exists here too. This is a Sony Hxr Nx80. Choosing this one since it's the one I've got. Now it shoots 4K video, can do high definition, slow motion up to 1,000 frames per second, excellent autofocus, you can film yourself easily by flipping the screen over, has night vision, steady shot image stabilization, and so much more. This though is the Sony TRV730, my very first camcorder that I bought brand new 20 years ago. A little over 20 years ago now. Now it doesn't shoot 4K, but have a look at the layout. Quick access to the buttons and key features inside. Once you open the door can be flipped over for a selfie mode if you want to film yourself. There's also a charge cable that goes into the back by the battery and can not only charge the camcorder but also power it for long shoots. And by the way, this super long-lasting battery that Sony still uses today in a number of different devices. In fact, the monitor that we're using right now to record this uses this exact same battery even after all these years. And yes, this original battery that I bought with this camera still works. I mean, not for a long time, but it actually still works. Now there's a viewfinder that can also pop up and go up on an angle for ease of use if you're looking down like that. And instead of the LCD panel like you have here, this is actually a high definition, so to speak, CRT display that's in black and white, similar to what you had on a lot of TV sets at the time, but they've just miniaturized it so it can be in here, giving you a very clear, albeit black and white, view of what you're looking at. Now there's also a USB connection to your computer, which, by the way, 20 years ago wasn't all that commonplace. That's pretty impressive to have USB connections on here. Now, while the video out connections have changed to HDMI on the modern cameras, this had a few interesting tricks up its sleeve all the same. So the S-Video and the analog RCA connections here, they weren't just outputs, these were also inputs. That means I could use this as a VCR and record shows, and if I went camping, I could bring some headphones and watch a show in between filming my adventures. And remember, this films in digital 8, so even though the tapes were analog, the recordings are 100% digital. Now, they had two other ways of viewing your recordings. One was FireWire, and while some of you might not remember what that was, Apple computers had this on just about everything, and it was way faster than any of the first generation USB connections were. Downloading digital recordings was actually super easy for editing this way, and on the front here, they had a thing called LaserLink. For those who had a Sony TV with a LaserLink receiver, you could actually beam your videos wirelessly thanks to a laser and watch them right away, which is pretty cool, right? And get this, even though this was way before widescreen TVs were a thing everywhere, you had the option of filming everything in a 16:9 format, which, since Sony did have some 16:9 TVs for sale, even if they were pretty big. Now the sensor in here was a big deal for the time because it had finally broken the 1 megapixel barrier for video cameras. Yeah, I know, not huge by today's standards, but remember, the resolution of TVs at the time wasn't nearly as high as what this could put out, so the picture quality was actually great for what it was. It's a relatively small 1/4 inch size CCD sensor versus the types of larger CMOS types of sensors we use today. Now here's the one last killer feature for this camcorder. Photos. Sony was the first to come up with the term memory stick, and that very term is synonymous with things like USB flash drives, but before SD cards were even a thing, Sony's memory stick was actually a big deal. With this massive 4 megabytes of storage, I can take photographs with this at a time when digital cameras were not affordable for everyone out there. Or they weren't all that good, for that matter. I could take night vision photos, close-up photos. It was actually quite versatile. And while it might not sound like full HD spec, it was actually capable of taking photos of 1152 by 864 resolution, so oddly enough, perfect for things like Facebook and Instagram today. And if I wanted to do something really unique for the time, I could actually record video digitally onto this memory stick, sort of course, but the processing power and the size of the stick kind of held it back. It can only record up to 2 minutes of low-resolution video to the memory stick. But again, for the time, recording digitally onto a memory stick, that's actually pretty cool. Getting footage off this camera was clearly made to be very easy for the time. Most would just plug into their TV directly using RCA jacks or maybe beam that signal out with that LaserLink. But if you had one of those funky, multicolored iMacs of the time, you could just plug it into the FireWire connection directly. But what about now in 2021? Would you believe that it's still a supported camera in Final Cut Pro for Mac OS? One problem is my current iMac doesn't have FireWire anymore, so I have a 4-pin adapter that converts it to a 6-pin FireWire cable. Now that goes to a FireWire 400 to 800 adapter, which then goes into a Thunderbolt 2 adapter, which is then connected to a Thunderbolt 3 adapter, which then plugs into my computer. And you know what? It actually works flawlessly. That's actually incredible. This camera was used as a prop at a photo shoot for Ghost Girl Goods in 2019, and sure enough, it was used to film some things there too, because it just refuses to die. But like with all things related to gear, it's not always about the picture quality or the resolution, it's the content. It's what you shoot. Silly nonsense videos shot so many years ago now make you kind of glad you got them. After the September 11th attacks in New York, I had to go down and talk to some people working for Saturn about upcoming products. But if I didn't have this camera at the time, I wouldn't have had this piece of history to look back at, or my time at Ground Zero, camping trips, friends who have come and gone, co-workers at previous workplaces, or even my dog. When I brought Phoenix home with me from the barn, she, well, only a few months old and without much human contact, I grabbed this camera. We became best of buds, and I took this camera everywhere with her. Look, well, some people use their camcorders to film their kids when they're young. I filmed my dog, and although I guess nowadays people just use their smartphone. I mean, man, if I could go back in time to when I got this, back when all I had was a Motorola StarTAC as my cell phone, and tell myself that the camera I was investing in would soon be replaced by a cell phone, I'd really just not understand. Also, I'd ask, how did I travel back through time? I guess that's why I hang on to some of this old equipment. Part hoarder, part appreciator. I guess the main point I'm making here is that just because something gets a little bit older doesn't mean it's bad. Any one of these cameras today could still work just fine for a number of uses. It used accordingly. I don't think we always have the need to have that push to have the latest and greatest, unless it absolutely, of course, is a genuine need. But getting newer gear doesn't improve your skill, and more importantly, it doesn't improve your content. For all we know, 20 years from now, we'll be able to record images or video straight from our eyes and onto our memory device stored in our head, Johnny Mnemonic style, but with hopefully less pain. Hopefully. And we'll look back at the weird times we shot with a smartphone the same way we look back at this quaint little camcorder. But I guarantee you, any of those families looking back on the kids' videos and photos that they took with their phone will still love every moment years from now. All of those friends, those parties, the dance nights, the first cars, all of those memories will be the important thing, not what it was taken on.